Hello and welcome everybody to tonight's Monsoon Awareness 2016 talk about significant weather. Tonight is our last night. All week long we've been talking about different significant weather threats associated with the monsoon. It is monsoon season. It started a couple days ago, and tonight we're talking about heat. A lot of people don't they don't think about heat as being part of the monsoon season, but I think today is a great example of what we're talking about because we are into monsoon season. It starts I wish it would start in January. It started in June 15th, and we're just a couple days into it, and we've got heat advisories, heat warnings all the way across the area. So Monday we started talking about flash flooding, and Tuesday was lightning. Wednesday was downburst winds. Yesterday was dust storms, and today we're talking about heat. And like I just mentioned, I think it's very appropriate that we are talking about heat today because it is hot and getting hotter across almost every part of the Southwest. I know that Phoenix and Tucson have heat warnings out. I don't know. Hey, Alex, do you guys have any heat warnings out?
Yeah, hi, Tim. We do. In fact, we have an excessive heat warning out for our valleys, mountains, and deserts. And then for our immediate coast, we have heat advisory.
Very good. I know that El Paso has heat advisories out for our lowland locations. And Corey, do you guys have any heat highlights out right now in Flagstaff?
Yeah, we do. We've got excessive heat warnings out for the Grand Canyon, down like the Phantom Ranch area, as well as parts of bordering areas down to Phoenix and the valleys of Yavapai County. So we do have a couple out.
Very good. Well, before I get going, I want to make sure I introduce everybody. First of all, again, my name is Tim Bryce. I'm a forecaster with the National Weather Service in El Paso. Running down the line here, over in Phoenix's forecast area, we've got Mr. Paul Enriquez. He's the Sioux over there.
Hello, how's it going again tonight? I'm excited to talk the final night about the heat. It's my favorite topic.
Oh, very good. And you're in like the heat capital of the United States right now, I think.
Right. Our office prides itself on how we tackle extreme heat. We are a leading force on this.
Wow. Over in the Tucson office is Glenn. How are you doing, sir? Oh, no. We can see you, but we can't hear you. You work on that. I'll come right back to you. Up in northern Arizona, we've got, let's see if I said it right, Corey Motice.
Motice, yes.
Yay.
How's it going?
He works there in the Flagstaff office, and I appreciate him joining us today. And over in the San Diego office, we have Alex Tardy. How are you doing, Alex?
Hi, Tim, and everyone else. Glad we could join and talk about relevant heat.
Very good. Well, like I mentioned, the heat is on right now for sure across the southwest part of the United States. You know, and again, like I mentioned at the beginning, you don't always think about heat as part of the monsoon season. Thanks, Paul. You read my mind. So here's what the current heat highlights look like. You can see a big hunk of southern New Mexico is under heat advisories. And then you've got heat warnings across a big hunk of southern California and most of southern Arizona. And then I think you got a heat watch there in the extreme north, right there, that brownie color there. So that means that they're just going to get hotter a little later. So going to be very hot this week. So I think this is a great time that we're talking about heat and everything that's going on because I think people are going to be very interested. They're going to want to know what to do to keep themselves and their friends and their family and their pets safe. But real quickly, before I'm going to have Paul kind of talk about the kind of weather that leads to really blistering heat. But real quickly, because we just ran over them, Glenn, I was wondering, can you kind of go over the differences between, like, let's say, a heat advisory and a heat warning and a heat watch? We got all these different heat terms, and I was just wondering if you can kind of just real simply break them down. I know that some of the numbers from office to office may differ, but, you know, kind of explain them to everybody there, what the difference is. Oh, can you talk? No. No. He's going to have to use sign language. Go up under the gear and click, and you'll see the second setting down from the top, and adjust those and see if that makes a difference. Real quickly, the differences are, the heat watch just means that, hey, it's going to get hot, not right now, not maybe tomorrow, but in a couple of days. Kind of gives you an idea to prepare. Maybe you're someone who's got an event coming up, gives you an idea that you need to be ready for the heat. It's not imminent, but it's coming. And then you have the heat advisory and the heat warning, and those two items are issued for various temperature climates or different climate. I know in El Paso, we issue a heat advisory when we are forecasting 105 degrees for a high and 75 degrees for low for 2 days in a row, whereas the heat warning is when we hit 110 and we've got a low of 75. So for us, that's what the heat warning is. Hey, Paul, what do you guys issue heat warnings and heat advisories for there in Arizona?
So we are using this heat impact level product that we've been developing for the last few years in the western region of the National Weather Service, and the western region is from Arizona to Montana, west to the coast. And that's what I'm showing here right now is this is the output from this product. And what it does is take our forecast, our official forecast, and then compare it to climatologically dry thresholds. So it helps us figure out when it's too hot for various parts of the country, so that those thresholds are going to be different. So 105 degrees in Phoenix is going to be different than what 105 degrees would mean in Bozeman, Montana. So this looking at the output right here from here's Sunday, here's Monday, and then here's Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday. So it's kind of, even into Friday, it's kind of hanging on a bit here. The different colors, the magenta being the worst. And this tool takes into account the high and the low temperatures and some duration. So when we see these magenta areas in here, that's by design rare. We should probably be only seeing magenta at most a handful of times in a year. And right now, for Phoenix, we are forecasting highs of on Monday and Tuesday around 118, 119. And to put that in perspective, we have daily observations in Phoenix since 1896, so that's almost 45,000 days of temperatures, and there's only been 4 days hotter than what we're forecasting right now.
Wow. So will you be setting records or tying records or close to records on those days?
We'll be breaking records. Right now, our records for Sunday and Monday are right around 115, and we're forecasting to be several degrees above that. So we should have no problem setting some new records. Wow. And then also, looking at the overnight temperatures as well, just pull up our forecast here for the Phoenix area. I believe we're forecasting our low temperatures are around 90 degrees or so here, if I pull my point up exactly for the airport. And of course, anyone that's watching is getting their forecast from weather.gov. And here's our forecast: 118 on Sunday, 119 on Monday. But look at these overnight temperatures as well: 90 degrees Sunday night into Monday morning, 90 degrees Monday night into Tuesday. And that's, heat this high is, it's extremely rare, and it's also deadly. It's very somber and unfortunate to say, but I can guarantee you that there's going to be deaths related to the heat this weekend in the Phoenix area.
It's unfortunate, and hopefully we're here tonight and we can talk a little bit about some of the safety procedures that people can take, some of the things that they can do to protect their loved ones, protect themselves. I did forget to mention at the top of the show, if you do have a question, you can tweet it at us. I've got the hashtag there on my lower third. It's send us a tweet with the hashtag Monsoon 2016. So real quickly, Corey, what levels do you guys issue your heat advisories and heat warnings for there up in Flagstaff?
So right now we're working towards using the same product that Phoenix is using, but we haven't fully implemented that yet. So ours actually changes. We have set numbers, and we only issue it for a couple of different areas in our forecast area, and that's up in the Grand Canyon, and as well as down in like Yavapai County, kind of near the Cottonwood, South of Prescott area, some of the more populated areas down there. And we have different high temperatures that changes as the year goes on. So currently, I believe it's about 110 degrees down at Phantom Ranch at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And earlier during the previous heat wave that we had, it was about 109 degrees. So it kind of goes up, and then within the next few days, it gets all the way up to about 114 or so. So it changes as the season moves on, and that is the same with the other area, and it's only below 4,000 feet. Up here in Flagstaff, we are expecting to get up into the mid-90s, and we're probably going to see a few areas break or at least come very close to breaking all-time record highs. And Flagstaff is one of them that's close. The all-time record high is 97, and we're going 95 right now, but it gets cold enough here still at night, even with temperatures that hot during the day, that the heat warnings aren't really a necessity up here.
Yeah, you can get that break. I don't think people really realize how important the cool down at night is. Back to your area of responsibility. You guys cover the Grand Canyon. I know a lot of people have been to the Grand Canyon, and there can be just a big temperature difference from the south rim of the Grand Canyon to the north rim, and that's just because of the difference in elevation, right?
Yeah, the north rim is about 1,000 feet higher, so it's closer to about 8,000 feet, and the south rim is right around 7,000 feet or so. And then on average from the top on the south rim to the bottom, which is a couple thousand feet, several thousand feet down there, it can be about 20 to 25 degrees warmer easily, especially during events like this.
Wow, I think Glenn's got your area of the Grand Canyon there, so you can see right where the canyon is, right down there in the bottom. It gets pretty toasty warm.
Yeah, it's just basically like a heat oven down there. You have all the rocks lining the sides, and it just gets heated up during the day, and it really doesn't cool down much at night. It's not as warm as Phoenix. It's not going to be in the 90s at night, but it's still probably going to see some lows in the lower 80s down there.
That's rough. Okay, Glenn, give it another try.
All right, can you hear me or no?
Yay! Success. We can.
Can you see me? It looks like I've got a mirror image. I don't know. That's kind of weird.
You're looking good. I can read the words behiund you, and we can hear
backwards?
You. Nope. You're fine.
Okay, it looks backwards to me. So I don't know what was going on with our technical difficulties, but it looks like we're good now. So I know we were talking about our excessive heat warning criteria, and different offices have different criteria. Right. So basically the way we do it down here in Tucson is we're heading towards those heat impact levels that Paul and Corey were talking about, but we're still using guidelines based upon different times of season and based on elevation. So for example, in our hottest time of year from June 15th to September, I think it's about early September, or mid-September, I don't remember the exact dates. For Tucson, our excessive heat warning criteria is 112, and that's basically in the range of elevations from about 2,000 to 4,000 feet or so that we have those criteria. And then in the mountains, there's lower criteria, and then kind of on the edges of the season, early in the season and late in the season, we have criteria for excessive heat warnings that are a little bit lower, since we're not used to seeing those very hot temperatures at those times of the year. So for Tucson, we're looking at 115 degrees on Sunday, which for us would be 2 degrees shy of our all-time record. So basically what we've really been trying to discuss is any outdoor activities that people have to really keep them before 10 a.m. Because there's kind of this misnomer out there where people think that, oh, 4 or 5 o'clock, it's not as hot then, I could go outside and do things, but that's not really the case. Even at 7, 8 o'clock at night, it's still really hot out. So really early morning is the only time that folks should be doing outdoor activities, and because inevitably what happens is every year we'll get hikers going out into trying to have a good day, and heat stroke kicks in, and heat is the #1 fatality or killer in Arizona for weather-related weather-related issues and such. So best to just keep inside and stay cool as much as possible.
Exactly. Now we got a question in on Twitter, and it says, does El Nino or La Nina have an impact on heat waves? And also, how common are heat waves this hot in New Mexico? I'll answer that. For us, for here in New Mexico, Right now, this isn't that unusual. You know, it's been, I think, 2 years since we hit like 105, 106. So it does happen on occasion. It hasn't been too long since we had some really warm temperatures. But it sounds like for you guys just over the border in Arizona that this is starting to push up towards, this is a very noteworthy kind of event. So I guess the other question is, does El Nino or La Nina have an effect on these heat waves during the summer? Anyone want to take that one?
I can go ahead, Tim.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, so typically we see the La Nina, El Nino, the warming or cooling of the Pacific equatorial ocean temperatures as a much bigger impact, and mainly an impact on winter storms and activity like that. Now, that said, we tend to see conditions like with La Nina that may be more conducive to this massive high pressure area not being bumped around as much during a La Nina time of year. But this current high pressure, even though we typically do see it start developing this time of the year over the Four Corners region, the magnitude of it is certainly one that's more like a 10, 20 year, maybe even more, return interval, where it's quite rare to see it this strong, this powerful, almost any time of the year. So it's an impressive high pressure area. Probably premature, too early to say, yeah, it's directly related to a developing La Nina, because usually things don't develop that quick. I would say, and it'd be interesting to see what others think, I would say, the magnitude of this high pressure may more easily be attributed to the fact that we have a multi-year running drought. And so whenever you have very dry conditions underneath, especially in Arizona and Southern California, you put warm air over it, a high pressure we call it, it's only going to make it that much stronger in these type of scenarios. So it's one that's going to go into the records. We're actually pushing all-time records in Palm Springs. The all-time record is 123, and we're forecasting 120. Just south of Palm Springs in Ocotillo, we're forecasting 123 near the Anza Borrego area. And their all-time record in that area, not as good of records, but is about 122.
Wow. That's incredible. That's just incredible heat. It's amazing. I know that I want Paul to kind of speak to the different weather patterns that can give us some heat. But I know that what's going to happen is that I checked the latest models. The upper level ridge, this area of high pressure, is kind of drifting its way over New Mexico right now. It'll kind of drift over northeastern New Mexico or northeastern Arizona, and then it's going to kind of wobble around and kind of like Alex said. Actually, I've got computer models that I was checking that it wobbles around, and by next weekend, we're going to hit our high, the highest days, either Saturday or Sunday. Then we're going to, I hate to say it, cool down. I prefer to say not as hot. But then it looks like by next weekend, the models are hinting at that it's going to get as hot or hotter next weekend. So this may not be something that goes away real quickly. But anyway, Paul, I was wondering, can you kind of tell us the weather pattern, describe to us the weather pattern, what's a ridge, and why does it get so hot when we get this big area of high pressure on top of us?
Yeah, definitely. I can show, let me show some tools here. So it's kind of a little, this will be some inside baseball basically here, what we're looking at. But this is a very basic weather map that a meteorologist would look at. So this is a 500 millibar height map. And when you say 500 millibars, it means that we are at approximately halfway up in the atmosphere. Half of the air is above this level and half of it is below this level. And these contours we see on the map are telling us at what height above mean sea level does that take place. And we're using the idea that as mass, as something gets warmer, it expands because of the kinetic energy it has. So whether it's a frying pan or the air, as it warms up, it expands. And so as the column of air, as all this air gets warmer, it expands and it rises. So this height gets higher and higher. So this map we're looking at right now, this is showing us where the high and low, the high ridges and the troughs are right now across the country. So we have this high height area right here, kind of centered on top of El Paso, and it extends north into the Great Plains of the Midwest. And you can see bookending that lower heights. So these are associated with lower pressure systems. So it's not necessarily low pressure because this is a constant pressure surface we're looking at. So lower heights and then the high heights here. The coloring that we have in the background for this particular tool we're looking at is it contextualizes this information for us. So it tells us, it puts these heights in a relative sense to the climatology. So for the 3-week window surrounding today's date, how extreme or not extreme are these heights? And that's what the bar along the bottom says. So where you start to get these brown, yellows, and especially the browns, and then eventually the reds show up, it's getting into like the 99th percentile or all-time high heights. So, you know, we're thinking of these tail end events. If you think of a distribution of heights, when you get into the tail ends, those are going to be rare events. So this tool helps us contextualize and find where that happens. So if I just step through a little bit, here looking at tomorrow afternoon, you can see how that height, the high height area, has now expanded based on the forecast, and we have this large area of red that has shown up in the area now. And so the red is meaning that that's the highest that has ever been recorded in the climatology. So it's about 30 years here of climatology it's looking at. So it's saying that for the middle of June, the heights have never been this high in this area. And if we step through to Sunday, you can see that that expands even further. I mean, this high height area is, you know, it's coast to coast. You can see it's going all the way from Southern California, San Diego, stretching all the way across the central part of the country and approaching the East Coast. This is a very large, sprawling, very strong area of high heights that's sitting on top of us. So it's going to be a lot of places that are experiencing the heat. And we go into Monday, that's still sitting there, and we get Tuesday. And just like you were alluding to, Tim, is that you can see how that red area is kind of shifting around, and it's shifting north as we go into later in the week and here into Thursday, so that the heat will be breaking across most of our area here. It looks like by the middle of next week, it's still going to be hot, you know, but not these very high extreme near all-time temperatures that we're talking about. So it's going to be hot, but not, you know, all-time hot. But as we're moving around, that high just kind of sits in there, and it doesn't really go anywhere. So this is Friday. This is the forecast for Friday right now. It's still this big ridge, this big high height area is still sitting over the western U.S. So, I mean, we're not seeing right now with the big influx of moisture at this time. So it looks like this is, you know, what we generally expect during the early part of the monsoon is that we have very hot temperatures. It just happens to be that this is hot even for our climate, these all-time record temperatures we're looking at. But this is pretty typical for June, this overall weather pattern that we're seeing here.
Exactly, and that's why we always include heat in our discussion when we're talking about monsoon season, because you can get, especially at the beginning of it, you can get this big heat wave. Even during the monsoon, you'll get breaks in the monsoon flow, and if one of these ridges happen to build in, you'll start to warm up, and we could very definitely get it. And that kind of the heat can build in, and that brings me to my next point. And anybody can jump in here, or Alex, or Glenn, or Corey. Is there a difference between, because you always hear people say, oh, it's a dry heat, and as opposed to a moist heat. Is it better to have a dry heat? I know that El Paso today hit a relative humidity of 3%, as opposed to a relative humidity of like 20%. Is it better to have heat when it's very dry, or when there's some moisture in the air and it kind of takes the heat down? What do you think?
I think a lot of that's personal preference. When the dew points are up in the, I don't know, upper 50s to 60s, yeah, you're not gonna hit, for example, 110 in Tucson. You're not gonna hit 115 in Phoenix. But you're gonna feel the moisture, and a lot of people, I think, Tim, especially out in New Mexico, they have swamp coolers, and those don't work as well when it's much more humid out. So I think a lot depends on that. I know personally, I would not want to have a swamp cooler with dew points in the 60s. They just don't work very well. So from that perspective, I know my own personal preference would be I would just prefer a little bit hotter and drier. But the thing is, heat still has significant consequences, and if you're not prepared for it, keeping hydrated and taking proper precautions, it doesn't matter if it's a dry heat or a moist heat. Hot is hot. If it's 100 degrees and humid, or 100 degrees and still dry, well, if you're doing the wrong activities, that still could have a significant impact on you.
And right, and now you've kind of led into our next section here that I want to talk about, and that is how to, and I want people to understand and kind of be aware of, when it does get hot, what are the symptoms of a heat illness, heat stroke? What are the differences? You've got heat stroke and heat cramps, and the different heat illnesses, and then what can people do to prevent themselves from being affected by the heat? What precautions can they take, and what precautions do they need to do for like their pets and the people around them? So again, I want to encourage anybody, if you do have any questions, to give us a Twitter question and using the hashtag Monsoon 2016. But real quickly, Corey, what should people who are like visiting the Grand Canyon, what should the precautions that they take, in the next couple of days as they're going to go down, take the mule ride down into the canyon, or even they're taking a river raft ride through the Colorado River? What are the precautions that they should they take when it's going to be so hot doing recreational activity?
So the main thing right now with heat this hot is actually not recommended at all to hike down the Grand Canyon. So we're basically, the point that we're pushing and that the Grand Canyon National Park Service is pushing is that if you are not in very good shape, even if you are heat this hot, it can overwhelm you so fast before you even know it. So we don't recommend anyone to hike down, but if you have to, we would say that you want to hike down very early morning. So you want to get up well before sunrise, and you pretty much want to be out of the canyon by maybe 8 a.m., 7 or 8 a.m., because it starts heating up in there very fast. So you want to make sure that you're hiking pretty much overnight, or get up very early morning. Make sure you drink plenty of water. If you start to feel dehydrated, it's too late. If you're starting to feel lightheaded or anything, you need to make sure you're just constantly drinking water, whether you feel like you're thirsty or not. Make sure you wear a hat, sunglasses, some light colored clothing, loose fitting clothing. You don't want to wear any heavy kind of clothes or anything like that. Same thing, even if you're rafting down the canyon, you just want to make sure that you have plenty of water, that you have the proper protection with sunblock and hat and sunglasses, and you want to stay in the shade as much as possible. And you want to do whatever you can to make sure that you're not hiking in any part of the canyon during the heat of the day, or any time pretty much after 10 a.m.
We as people, we tend to focus on ourselves, but I'm sure, I think a lot of people have taken those mule rides down into the canyon, and the heat affects those mules just like it does us, does it not?
Oh, it definitely does, yeah. And because of that, they will be taking much more frequent breaks going down. And I'm not sure if it gets too hot, if they will stop the mule rides at some point. I'm not really sure what their policy is on that exactly. But, I've been hiking down the Grand Canyon when it was about 90 degrees. And even then, you see some of the mules kind of get exhausted, and they have to stop pretty frequently for water, just to rest, and they'll stop in the shaded areas. So it definitely affects them as well.
Now, what I don't think people realize, and we alluded to it, kind of like lightning, heat is in many ways a silent killer. It kind of gets people, one person here, one person there, and it's hard to visualize. For lightning, I can show you a beautiful picture of a lightning strike. For tornado or for flooding, we've got the big flooding pictures. For the haboobs and the dust storms, we've got the great dust storm pictures. If I put up a radar picture of heat, there's nothing on it. If I show you a satellite picture of heat, you just see there's no clouds because of the high pressure. It's very hard, I think, for people to visualize. We can't put it in the same terms like we do when we can show a nice hook echo of a radar, or a raging a flooding arroyo or something like that. So I think sometimes it can be challenging for us to get our messages out. So I want people just to be thinking about it, especially considering the heat that we're going to be seeing this weekend. Hey, Glenn, do you have any fires that you guys are working in your CWA, in your area of responsibility?
We had one a few days ago in the White Mountains. Been off for a couple of days, so I did not get briefed that there was anything. So
I'm trying to think. Is it Corey? Is it up where you guys? Is it the Casper fire?
The Cedar Fire. Yeah, that one's the one near Sholo right now. We actually have probably, I just estimate at least 8 to 10 different fires ongoing right now. But the one that's causing the most imminent threat to anywhere would be that Cedar Fire near Sholo.
Well, Glenn, I was wondering if you could address, the firefighters who go out on the line to fight the fires. They have to take special precautions, and the people who are in the incident command center need to be aware that not only fire is a hazard, but in this case, the heat can be a hazard, can it not?
Oh, absolutely. Even in higher elevations, 7,000 feet, it still gets really hot up there. And the firefighters and crews that are out there, they have to wear very heavy equipment that's properly rated for fire and protection. So not only are they out there working up a sweat considerably with just alone given the hot temperatures, but given that equipment, and they're also carrying up to 50, 100 pounds of equipment, because a lot of the wildland firefighters, they basically will just get perhaps dropped into a location, and they're going to be out there for 12, perhaps upwards of 24 hours out there fighting the fire. So yeah, it is really critical, and so firefighters do have to take special precaution to keep themselves properly hydrated and protected from the heat impacts as well, from fire impacts.
Right, and I think that would apply to anybody who has to work outside, whether you're working a construction project, working on a roof, working building a highway or something like that. If you're outside, I think it's OSHA requirements that they have to give you breaks, they have to give you shade, they have to give you water, because good heavens, the project doesn't move forward if all the workers get sick. Hey, let's see. We talked about people who have to work outside, the firefighters. We talked about people doing recreation. But Paul, I was wondering, for the general public who are in and out of their houses, who may be trying to go to work and things, what are some of the things that they need to be aware of as far as the heat safety goes?
Well, for a lot of folks, the heat's probably, honestly, not going to be a problem. There's a lot of folks that are probably like us in our offices. We have the luxury of working in air-conditioned offices, have air-conditioned cars, and go to air-conditioned homes. And so the heat warnings we put out aren't going to be necessarily for those folks. It's really going to be geared towards, like you guys have been talking about, those folks who they work outdoors, or they don't have the luxury of having air conditioning. The statistics, so just some of the statistics for the Phoenix area itself, Maricopa County, the County Department of Health, they've been doing a pretty good job looking at heat-related deaths over the last 10 years. They've really gotten on top of recording this, because sometimes it can be pretty hard to figure out if a death was actually heat-related. So they've been working really hard on that over the last 10 years. So they're at this point now where they can record them pretty good. They find that on average, every year, there's about 80 deaths related to heat in the Phoenix area. I mean, that's a very high number. If you think about how many people typically die each year from lightning strikes in Arizona, it's a very small handful. Flash floods, a small handful again. Severe thunderstorms, dust storms. We're talking about, one on the order of like 1 in 5, maybe 10 people at most each year. And heat, now we're talking about upwards, 80, that's on the order of 100 people each year. So it's by far our biggest killer. But it's not the most picturesque thing like you were just talking about. So if we look at, trying to communicate this threat, I have it right here. I mean, it's almost like a joke. But you think about before the heat wave and after the heat wave. I mean, nothing really changes here. It looks the same as when I pulled out of the garage in the morning. But even still, for some of those folks that they do go to their air-conditioned home, they do go to the air-conditioned office, this heat wave is really going to come in strong on Sunday. And it's a weekend, so maybe if I'm a day jobber kind of person, Monday through Friday, so it's the weekend, I got some yard work to do or something like that. It's going to be a problem. I'm not going to do yard work. I mean, I have yard work that I need to do. I'm not going to do it this weekend. It's just I'm not going to go outside and expose myself to this kind of heat because it's going to be deadly. And we look at the statistics of what kind of people actually die from heat in the Phoenix area. And it's going to, and a lot of times, it's people that have lived here for quite a while. The folks that, despite what the common belief might be, the typical person that's dying from heat in the Phoenix area is not my uncle from Chicago who's visiting or my aunt from Seattle who isn't acclimated to the heat. It's people who live here, people who have lived here for quite a number of years. Yes, you get acclimated to the heat to an extent, but when you start getting temperatures this high, this intense, that doesn't matter anymore. So, I mean, folks just need to, I mean, it almost sounds ridiculous and like it's fear-mongering, but it's really not. I mean, just don't go outside and don't expose yourself to it. But if you are going to go out, if you have to go out, really do the things to mitigate it. Just drink a lot of water, drink more than you think you could possibly need, basically. Cover yourself from the sun, wear light-colored clothing. You see a lot of the guys who go out and do landscaping work. You might notice that they all wear long-sleeve shirts and have hats on that are covering them up because they're protecting themselves from the sun. I mean, I might just go, I'll be outside maybe on Sunday, but I'm probably going to jump in the pool and hug the block of ice while I'm in there. That's going to be my way of cooling down. So that's different ways of doing it. But I mean, there's plenty of places you can go to get away from the heat. Other places, if you can't run air conditioning, the statistics from the county show too that the folks that die, about 10% of them either don't have air conditioning or can't afford it or it's broken. I mean, so it's not, even in these situations, you're trying to advise people that this is one of those situations where even if it's expensive, you're going to want to run that air conditioner because, like we showed earlier, it's going to be really hot during the day and it's going to stay really hot at night. You're just not going to escape that heat. If you have in some of these urban areas, the lows are going to be like 92, 93, 95 overnight. That's as cool as it gets, 95 degrees. I mean, think about that. Your house is, if you don't have air conditioning running, your house is not going to get below 100 degrees for the next, from Sunday through probably Tuesday. So you need to be running your air conditioning at this point.
That's just a horrible thought. Hey, Glenn, I would like Glenn to kind of talk to how to, to look for the different signs of a heat illness, whether it's heat cramps or heat stroke. What are the symptoms, so that if you do find yourself out, if you're doing something at the park, what are the signs that people can look for? But before we get to that, like Paul was saying, it's so many people just don't even think about it. And like you said, you could be working Monday through Friday and going out and just doing simple yard work during the middle of the day. What a week ago would not have been a problem, coming up now, this weekend, is certainly going to be a problem. And like you said, it's probably best that you don't do it. Hey, it's going to be Father's Day. We give all the fathers a kind of free pass this weekend not to do yard work because it's just going to be so very hot. And again, Paul mentioned is something that we need to do, that we need to check on the elderly. We need to check on the people who either their air conditioner is broken, maybe invite them into our home, make sure that they have some place to get to a cool environment, because just running a fan without air conditioning won't help you. You're just pushing hot air around. You've got to have some way to cool that air down. So it's real important that we keep an eye on our neighbors. So many of us may have an elderly neighbor. Maybe it's a grandparent, an abuelo and abuela that we need to check on, who maybe they don't have air conditioning, and we need to bring them into our house for a couple of days, or something like that. So be sure to be checking on the elderly the whole time, and make sure that we can all get through this upcoming heat spell real well. But Glenn, I was wondering if you could go over some of the different heat illnesses and some of the symptoms, so that if people start to feel a little dizzy, or they start to get some cramping, that's the early sign of something, or if their skin starts to get real hot. So what are some of the different heat illnesses people need to be aware of, and what should they do when they start to see some of those symptoms?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So could you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I brought up some of the, so everyone can see some of the different heat illnesses and factors that that occur when it gets really hot. So this is from a great resource from OSHA. So like heat stroke is fairly common, and some of the symptoms include things like confusion, fainting, seizures, and of course very high body temperatures. So heat stroke is very serious and could potentially lead to death if action's not taken. Even if it is taken, it might be too late. So most importantly, if you're experiencing any of those types of symptoms, being outside, or even if you're inside, like Paul was mentioning, because your air conditioner is broken or whatever, and you're not running and it's 100 degrees in your house and you're just doing stuff, you feel definitely the same symptoms. So of course, call 911, and you want to just try to get the person as cool as possible. Also loose clothing, remove outer clothing. You want make sure you use cold packs, try to fan the person. Basically, you want to do whatever you can to get the person to have a cooler body temperature until help arrives. So then kind of the next level down from that would be heat exhaustion, which some of the symptoms for that would be the skin's actually cool and moist, sweating a lot, headaches, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, being thirsty, so being dehydrated, irritable, a fast heartbeat, and more or less it's a lot of the same first aid as for heat stroke. Basically want to have the person be in a cool cooler, shady area, plenty of water to get the person colder, also using cold compresses and ice packs, best not to return to work if you happen to be working that day. Then down the line, heat cramps, muscle spasms, and pain is pretty common symptoms from heat cramps, and more or less fairly similar first aid. And then heat rash would just be kind of like clusters of red bumps on the skin, and that would often be on the neck, upper chest, etc. And similar to the other ones, except you want to get into a cooler, less humid environment and keep the area dry. And so those are kind of the most common heat-related illnesses that are out there, and some of the symptoms and first aid and such, what you should do when those occur.
And definitely heat stroke is by far the most serious and the most life-threatening. Many times in the humans, we can see those symptoms. You kind of start to see heat exhaustion. You see some of those symptoms, and if you kind of keep pushing through, you'll get to heat stroke. But sometimes it's not so obvious with our pets. And here in just a second, I'd like Corey to kind of talk about some heat safety tips related to your pet. But I was just looking at, you mentioned OSHA, and they put out some statistics that in 2014, just for workers, there were 2,630 heat-related illnesses, and of those, 18 workers died. And that was just in 2014. And I think it's also, Paul kind of alluded to it earlier, I'm pretty sure that there were other heat-related deaths and illnesses that were not attributed to the heat, because sometimes it takes the form of a different symptoms. But if you really dug down into it, you would see that heat was definitely a factor. But I know that the heat can affect us humans, and we need to be looking out for ourselves. But we also need to be looking out for our four-legged kids, our fur kids, as my wife likes to call them. Corey, what are some of the safety tips that people need to take when it comes to their pets?
It's really pretty much the same as what you take yourself. You don't want to leave a pet in a car just like you wouldn't want to leave a human or a kid in a car. That cars heat up very, very quick in the heat, so you never want to do that. And if you are in the car, make sure the air conditioning's on. They still need to drink plenty of water. They need to be kept in the shade. You don't want them to be out running around all day when it's 100 15 degrees out or whatever it is, they'll get exhausted just like humans will. It may be a little bit harder to tell because pets can't tell you that they're suffering from being too hot or not enough water or whatever. So you need to make sure that you take care of them, same as you would yourself. And up here in Flagstaff, no one has air conditioning. I mean, really, I don't know a single person up here that has air conditioning. So even though we're only going to be in the 90s or maybe the mid-90s during the middle of the heat wave, inside your apartment, especially like in my apartment, for instance, I'm on the second floor, no air conditioning. At night, it'll still get down into the 40s, maybe the 50s in some of the warmer nights. But my apartment during the afternoon can get over 110 degrees. And It's already happened this year when it only hit 88 and it was 108 degrees in my apartment. So it can get ridiculously hot in the apartments, even though the temperature outside isn't near as warm, just because you don't have the breeze blowing in. You're on the second floor, so all that heat's rising. So even if you're in your apartment, you still want to make sure that, like they were saying, you have plenty of water. Since there's really no escape to air conditioning in the Flagstaff area, just because it typically does not get hot enough up here to where we need air. So even like the churches and a lot of the big buildings don't have air conditioning. Fortunately, we do it at work, but a lot of places don't. So you need to take the precautions there as well, even though it's not going to be near as hot as, say, down in Phoenix or the Tucson area.
Exactly. And, you know, I tell people, you think about our pets, our dogs and our cats, they're essentially wearing a jacket or a fur coat and running around. Imagine if you were outside when it's 110 degrees with a fur coat on. You can kind of imagine what's going to be happening. And if I don't know pet physiology real well, but I don't think they sweat like we do. So it's a little more challenging for them to cool off. So again, provide them with that shade, provide them with some water. I know for us, we have like a little doggy door, so they can run in and out of if they need to go outside to do the thing, they can go outside, then they can come back inside to the house where it's cool. So just make sure you take care of your fur kids, your pets, because they are equally affected with the heat. We got a question on Twitter, and I was wondering if somebody could look up, or maybe I imagine one of you guys knows, because I'm pretty sure it happened in one of your areas. But there was two-part question. One is, what's the hottest temperature ever recorded in the U.S., and what was the longest heat wave? And I'm going to answer that last one first, and then if someone can look up that highest temperature in the U.S. We had, this actually, we'll see what happens this week. We may be looking at kind of a record-setting heat wave, but I know that back in, people go back to the 30s. Those were very impressive heat waves back in 34, 36. But also more recently, you had 1980 was a rough year. Lots of high temperature records still stand. I know my first year in the Weather Service, 1994, was a very impressive year for southern New Mexico. We set our all-time record high at 114 on 2 days during that summer. And just an impressive number. I think well over 60 days we were over 100 degrees, so very impressive. So there have been several years where we've had lengthy and very hot spells, which, again, like we've kind of implied, you can maybe manage 1 day or two when it's real hot, but when it's hot day after day after day and it doesn't cool down at night, it just starts to take its toll, especially on people who don't have a way to get cool, whether it's from lack of air conditioning or it's broken or something like that. So real quickly, who has the record high temperature for El Paso, or for the United States?
Should be right here. I got it up on my screen, so it's going to be 134 degrees. That was Death Valley back in 1913.
Yikes. Well, let's hope we don't see that anytime soon. But you can also see that 1913 was a hot year because the two other record highs are up there, 130 and 131. So just blistering hot. Of course, 2013 is also slipped in there.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, this question, you kind of get into, what do the temperatures mean? We've been talking about it here in the office. Instrumentation changes over time. We haven't had the same thermometer, and it hasn't been sitting in the same location for 120 years. So there's going to be various issues of what instrument we're using, where was it. There's even instrumentation accuracy questions. That every instrument has some error associated with it. It's never perfect. That doesn't happen in the physical world. I mean, just on the most basic level, when you observe something, you are interacting with it and you are changing the environment. So you're never going to get an absolute reading on something. But even right now, our sensors we use, which are pretty good sensors, they are going to have, most of the time their accuracy is going to be plus or minus a degree, but they can be off, with the accuracy within tolerance of even up to 2 degrees. So even though a high may come in and say 110, in reality, with the accuracy, maybe plus or minus a degree in that. So, I mean, if you really get into it and you start, doing a deep dive on what does the high temperature actually mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. But for most folks, they don't need that, right? We can just look at the one number. And sometimes we get caught up too much in the numbers. I mean, that's like a big thing I've been pushing in our office this week is, regardless if we hit 118 or the magic 120 or whatever, it doesn't matter. The fact is it's going to be a deadly heat that's setting in here. Like I said earlier, I mean, I have no qualms about this. It's very unfortunate and very sad, but there's going to be heat-related deaths this weekend. I really don't think we're going to get by without having any deaths related to heat getting through Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. It's unfortunate it's going to happen, but you know what? It doesn't matter if it's 117 again or 120, whatever. It's totally germane to the point there. So, I mean, folks get kind of hung up on numbers. It's a psychological thing. You see people go crazy on Twitter with that kind of stuff. But I mean, from us, our whole point of existing as a government agency is to provide weather information to people so they can make more informed, smarter decisions to negate those negative outcomes.
Right. And before we get into talking about, I'd like Glenn to kind of talk about the heat index and what that specifically is. I had a real quick story from El Paso, because when you were talking about moving weather instruments or, whether we use the same instrument, something that we've noticed here in El Paso is that, we've had the one official thermometer is at the International Airport, and it's been sitting there now 50 years. It may not have been the exact same instrument, but it's been basically in the same spot for 50 years. But over the last 10 to 15 years, we've noticed a steady increase in the low temperatures at night. What usually happens is that during the evening hours and overnight hours in kind of areas where you get rain, you get drainage winds, and you get drainage winds down the river valleys. And a lot of times we get drainage winds from the north, and that would cool us off at night. But recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean Fort Bliss has expanded extensively. They basically doubled their base size, and that has all been to the north and northeast of El Paso. And I really think that increase of buildings and cars and pavement and concrete has really affected our heat island and has spread it to the north, so that when we get those north drainage winds, those things that used to cool us off at night don't have the same cooling effect. So like Paul was saying, it doesn't matter if it's 117 or 120, it's hot and it can really affect people. And then when you take that heat and you factor in even a little bit of moisture, it can make it even seem hotter, and it can make it even harder for the bodies to cool down. So we have an actual index that kind of helps us measure that. Isn't that right, Glenn? It's called the heat index?
Yeah. So the heat index is basically a tool that's used or index to give folks a better idea of what the temperature feels like when you combine the air temperature with the humidity. So what we were talking about earlier in the chat was the temperature with a dry heat feels like it's a little bit cooler, whereas you add in the humidity, it feels a little bit warmer. So, so here we often see temperatures averaging generally somewhere around 105 degrees in Tucson in the early summer. Say in June, like this month, and but if the humidity is low, it doesn't quite feel that hot. Like we were talking about 3% humidity before, but you can see on this chart, you start getting humidity values higher. So if it's 100 degrees and the humidity is 60%, which that doesn't really ever happen, at least around in the Southwest, it'll feel like 124. So basically, the more humidity that's in the air, the less that your body can evaporate the sweat that's forming, and thus it'll feel hotter. So that's the advantage of a dry heat. Is I know I felt it. When I'm outside, I could actually feel the sweat evaporating as I'm outside and such. So, but yeah, heat index is a great tool to at least kind of tell you how it feels when it's a little bit more humid outside with the heat as well.
And people can kind of real roughly use that as for those with coolers. Again, with a higher relative humidity, your cooler is not going to be as efficient for those that have coolers. So I know, like you said, many times the heat index it actually is a little below the actual temperature because of how dry it is. Like I said, it was 3 or 4% today here in El Paso, which is way off the bottom end of that chart. But I know other places just east of the mountains where you get that moisture, and even once we get into the monsoon season, when we'll be 95 and we start to get those dew points in the 50s and the 60s, that starts to pull that relative humidity up, and it just makes it that much harder for your body to stay cool, and you'll sweat, but you just won't be able to cool down, and then that's when you start to see, if you keep pushing yourself, that's when you start to see some of those heat-related illnesses. So it's just another way to be aware that how heat can affect us. Well, believe it or not, it's almost the top of the hour, so real quickly, we've had a great conversation here. I want everyone kind of just hit home their pet safety tip for heat, and we'll wrap things up for another successful Monsoon Awareness Week 2015. But first, we'll go over to Corey there in Flagstaff. And Corey, what's one thing that you want the people to remember as they tune out for tonight?
Main thing is, if you do have any outdoor activities, since that's what a lot of people do in northern Arizona, is to make sure that you either plan them for early in the morning before 10 a.m. or so, and try to cancel any strenuous activities that you have outside activity-wise planned during the day, and make sure you drink plenty of water.
Very good, and it's, we thank all the firefighters who are fighting the fires out there. I know that actually our office, IMET, is out in the field in Arizona, so they need to also be taking the precautions, and I'm sure that they are, but I can't imagine trying to fight a fire that's hot in the first place in really hot temperatures wearing all that equipment. So, just want them to take as many precautions as they need to stay safe, because I know they're trying to keep us safe as well. Very good. Glenn, what would you like people to leave with? What thought?
I will pass along the slogan from the Department of Transportation and National Highway Safety Administration. It's a new slogan. It replaces a previous one about checking the back seat. This one is called, "Where's Baby? Look before you lock." So just want to keep in mind for any time in general, but especially when it's hot, to make sure you're not leaving any pets or babies, certainly in your vehicle. So I think we'll leave with that note.
And you bring up a good point. We didn't get a chance to really touch on that. That's the importance of it. Every year we read the tragedy, and I think one just happened earlier this week in Houston, where a child gets into it. In this case, I think the child crawled into the car and couldn't get out. But so many times you have parents who are hectic, and they forget that they were the ones taking the kids to daycare, and they drive straight to work, and they leave their kid in the car, and they come back hours later, and the horrible, the most horrible thing has happened, that the child has died. Those are completely preventable deaths. So, like you said, what's the new saying going to be again?
It's "Where's Baby? Look before you lock."
So it's just, again, all trying to educate people, trying to remind us that if you're taking your kid to daycare or driving around, or even a pet, don't leave them in the car. I've heard one suggestion is that people have said put your cell phone in the baby seat, so that when you get out of the car, you'll feel for your cell phone. A lot of people will feel for their cell phones first, and that will, if they've forgotten, they'll go, oh yeah, it's with the baby. Maybe I should grab the baby too. So I know most of us, that's not an issue, not a problem, but it tragically happens too many times, and I think it's happened over a dozen times this year already. So it's a completely preventable death, and we want to just keep that from ever happening. And we didn't even talk about it. And I know, Paul, you guys there at the Phoenix office have actually cooked cookies in a car at one time to kind of demonstrate how hot. It's essentially as hot as an oven there, right?
Right, yeah. A couple of years ago, some of our folks put cookies on a cookie sheet and stuck it in the dashboard, and they were able to at least cook the cookies. I mean, the temperature in the car can get up to 160 plus degrees. So, I mean, the big message that we've been conveying, and our office has been extremely aggressive on the message here because, again, the heat is the deadliest weather that we have here in Phoenix, regardless of the lightning or the floods or the haboobs, all that kind of stuff. The heat is what's going to impact most people year in and year out. And right now we're looking at a very significant, almost historic heat wave that's going to be coming in starting on Sunday and going into early next week. So, I mean, even if you lived here 5, 10, 20 years, think you can handle the heat, I mean, this isn't your opportunity to prove how amazing of a Phoenician you are. I mean, just take it easy. Don't go out if you don't need to. It's not the time to shine. So I hope we can get through the weekend, get in early next week without too big of an impact. I think we've been on this pretty big time. I'm sure everyone's aware that this is coming, so there should really be no excuses for bad things to happen here.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope we can get through the weekend with no fatalities. But like you said, Paul, when you're talking about heat this much, it's inevitable that somebody gets forgotten, something happens, somebody doesn't have air conditioning, somebody decides that they can walk a little later in the morning than they thought they could, and before they know it, the heat has snuck up and has really started to affect them. And unless they get, and we saw that on those heat stroke, as soon as you start to see some of those heat stroke symptoms, that's not a, I need to slow down. That's a stop and go to the hospital immediately, because that is a life-threatening kind of situation. So I pray that everyone stays safe. Try to stay cool this weekend as best that you can. It's definitely going to be a hot one all the way across the Southwest, from far west Texas all the way to Southern California, with Arizona and Nevada in between. Going to be very hot. Take it easy. I appreciate everyone joining me today. We had Paul from the Phoenix office, we had Glenn from the Tucson office, and we had Corey from the Flagstaff office. I'm Tim from the El Paso office. It was great all week long. We had a great time talking about the different threats related to the monsoon season. If you want to see any of these videos, they're going to be on the NWS El Paso YouTube page. You can just type in NWS in El Paso, and I've set up a monsoon 2016 list, and you can kind of go through them all. We talked about, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we talked about flash flooding on Monday, lightning on Tuesday, I believe it was downburst winds on Wednesday, haboobs or dust storms on Thursday, and today we've talked about heat and different heat-related illnesses. So, again, thanks to everyone. Stay safe, stay cool, and enjoy the weekend. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.